amazing. Sorry, I couldn't attend. And I was planning to attend the rise, but I was looking at the analysis that you did go through. And yeah, I spent some time just looking at the work you've done with trying to get doctors into housings, and you talked about the history.
Yes.
Of course, America had like significant history. And I think house ownership is still probably a problem. And I do have some questions for you in terms of what you're doing in the US and how people down here could, possibly plug into what you're doing, because people would put a down payment for a mortgage. I mean, this is my opinion. The mortgage in the UK has its own problem. So that would be one of the things I'll be speaking to you about. But specifically, I think for today is just to look at the salaried, medical money. It's really not enough. And I've worked in at least 2 countries now. And there's always a fight between, doctors or nurses or whoever wanting to get more pay than what the system can offer. Not so much in America, though. I think the last time doctors went on strike in America was, I think if I remember very well, was in the 80s.
Oh, gosh. I can't even remember.
So,
not recent.
Yeah, so I mean, pay-wise, but if you go across where, medical care is, there's a decent amount of it that comes from public funding. I don't think you would ever get the money that you think sort of work. So that's why this is very important, and you've done so much of entrepreneurship in quite a really record time. So hi everyone. So I'm going to just introduce our guest, who is Dr. Nkem Ezeamama, and she's the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Capital Investment. It's based in Nashville, Tennessee, and Phoenix Capital Investment is specifically experts in terms of acquiring mortgage, and which we know is difficult for every group, but my understanding is, at least globally, probably more difficult for people of color. I think that's the most, and you found a way to really make that happen. And at the background of that, you've been an emergency physician for a very long time, really. You've been an emergency physician since 2015. That's a long time.
That is correct.
Yes, and so that would be the equivalent of a consultant emergency medicine physician here in the UK. And you are as well faculty in the emergency medicine, I think, for one of the universities. I didn't put them on here because I wasn't sure about disclaimers.
Thank
you. I'm not going to spend too much time talking. I think they know me already, but we'll just go to the outline. And in terms of, we'll talk about our speaker, we'll talk about the financial reality of modern medicine and why salaries will probably not do it any longer for those that are worrying about financial freedom. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be a problem for everyone, because the mortgages are not going to become cheaper. The bills are probably not going to become cheaper. And then why medical entrepreneurship is really very important, and moving from employee to value creator, and practical steps to begin. And we'll talk about Phoenix Capital in Nashville, Tennessee. So I would allow you to talk about yourself. It's best to hear from the very own meets legend, extraordinary doctor and business person and academic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Aja. So I'm excited to be here, and I just want to say the amount of work and effort that you've put into this is very, very commendable. And I'm really honored that to be here and to kind of educate your guests and to just let them know a little bit about my journey. So my name is Nkem Ezeamama, and I'm an emergency medicine physician. 10 years now in the making, but obviously, it's been longer than that when you add med school and undergrad and all of the things. But I love what I do. But that love somewhat started to change. And I remember very well, right? You might be wondering, like, you are comfortable, you are an ER physician or EM physician. Why did you seek entrepreneurship? And practice of medicine has changed over the years. I think if our predecessors were listening to this or seeing us, they would be surprised to see where medicine has gone to today, right? And with the likes of private equity groups buying up practices and hospitals, we went from truly the practice of medicine to maybe a little bit more on the business side of medicine, because that's where we are today. But that affected patient care, and it also affected us as physicians, right? So we got to the point where in the hospital, our hours were cut and our hours were tied to pay, and physicians started getting fired, and all these things started happening. And there was so much more administrative oversight. So if you had asked me 15 years ago, like, I always thought I was going to be just a doctor, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? We get to save lives. We get to make a difference when it matters the most to patients. But, as life would have it, it wasn't exactly what I had planned. And when all those things started happening, I started thinking about life outside of medicine, and I started thinking about how we needed to diversify our wealth, right? Because if you notice, a lot of physicians, and we'll talk about this towards the end, but I think it's important because a lot of physicians, after medical school, you come out, after medical school residency, you come out, you have debt. But you also go from making nothing to making a significant amount, right? And so there's also this idea of lifestyle creep. So you start making more, and so you start increasing your cost of living starts increasing. If you have kids, you're going to private school. If you're buying the biggest houses, and you're almost living paycheck to paycheck, but on a kind of grander scale, right? And so I started thinking about how can it really started with a pain point for me. And as an entrepreneur, when you start figuring out how to solve a problem, right, that's when you start creating value, and that's when you have something that the world would want. And so for me, my pain point was I couldn't rely only on medicine, and I wanted to start understanding how to diversify wealth, how to build wealth outside of what you call my 9 to 5, even though I don't work 9 to 5. And that's how I started investing in real estate. But I didn't only do real estate, right? I was in stocks, I was maxing out my 401k, I was in insurance, I did a little bit of oil and gas, but real estate became kind of my main source. And it started very passively. I started as a passive investor, which just meant I worked hard. I took a portion of my money and I invested it in a real estate investment opportunity, like an apartment complex, which is what Phoenix does. And so then while I'm working, that apartment complex is generating income, and that income is coming back to me as passive income. So I'm not doing the work, but I'm reaping the benefits because I'm part owner, because I invested in it. And so when I saw that opportunity, I kept doing it, and I kind of rerouted some of my money, more of a majority of my funds, and started investing in more properties, right? Because housing is a basic human need, and everybody needs a place to stay. So if you cannot afford to buy, you still need a place to live, and so you're going to rent. So the rental market in the US was booming, and I said, I want to be a part of that. But what I noticed was that there weren't a lot of us that knew about this. We are all medical experts, and we know medicine really well, but we didn't know anything else. And so I thought, in addition to figuring this out for myself, I'm going to bring it to the people who look like me, who work as hard as I do, and to bring it to my community. And I started talking about it, and I started telling people we have to invest outside of our 9 to 5, our everyday, if we're going to really talk about wealth creation, right? The wealthiest of the wealthiest are business owners, they're investors. Some of them inherited their wealth, but a lot of them are not W-2 workers. And so I started saying, why don't we do all these other things? And that was when I realized that there was value that I was bringing to my community. And that's how Phoenix was born. It was born out of a need, to really help others grow wealth outside of their 9 to 5. And those others really were healthcare professionals, were people in my community where they could do what they love and still build wealth. So that's a little bit about me, and how I got here today.
Amazing. And I think there is certainly people in the UK, maybe a smaller amount on the continent, that may be able to want to invest in Phoenix. We'll go into that a bit. I've seen bloggers online, they've tried to do what would 100K buy for you in Lagos, and then London, then New York. I mean, the dynamics is different, but it's just saying people are thinking in this direction.
Yep.
And I mean, I completely agree with you. We spend a long time in this school of whatever. It's probably worse in the UK, because American system, you get down to business and get stuff out of the way. And you spend, and you keep, I've been taking so many exams now. And it feels like, okay, because I used to, when you finish med school, you feel like you have a decent amount of time. Then you need to pass this exam, then there's another exam, and then someone comes up, like they've come up with the robots now. So we have some surgeons that, even if the guideline says, we can do it laparoscopically, if it's not robotic, don't put it on my list, get somebody else to do it. So you have this robot and you have some protectionism.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how it is in the US, but in the UK, at least in general surgery, you need a proctor to say, fine, we think you've done enough right hemi robotically.
Okay.
Now we agree that you can do left. So which is really, you keep schooling, like you keep, things. So amazing work. So let's get a bit. I think I've looked again. You've done some work that people would find, useful. Dr. Nkem is on Spotify, so go listen to it. And I mean, you don't need a new subscription to listen to our Spotify, and Spotify will do the rest for her. And you have this ultimate passive investor playbook. Could you just tell us what it is? How does it help, that 9 to 5 doctor?
Great.
It's not 9 to 5, it's 12 to 12. Because I go to, I leave home when I'm on call 6 a.m. and then I'm back somewhere around 9. And I always do this 1 hour that the system doesn't want to pay me for. And I don't want to ask them, because I don't want to piss the entire hospital by not being, there to save lives. So, I mean, the system says I can ask, but I don't want to be the first person. According to Nigerians, not before my mouth, they will hear that.
So
yes, the ultimate passive playbook.
What is it? So
Yeah.
when you start as a passive investor, right? When you start evaluating deals, or even as a high net worth investor or a high net worth income person, right? When you start thinking about investing, there's so much that's thrown at you. There's all sorts of investing, some good, some bad. So this playbook walks you through how to vet a deal, how to vet a sponsor, how to vet a market, so that you know that as you're investing, you're making the right decision. So it's very, very important, because like I said, a lot of things will be thrown at you. A lot of opportunities will be thrown at you. The question is, what is the right opportunity? So this walks you through red flags, green flags, what's good, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. All of those things are important. And this walks, and even how to partner with the right person. So the right owner, the right sponsor, how to vet them, what their track record is, who have they invested with, what have they done, have any opportunities failed. So this is like an A to Z of how to invest in the right opportunity.
Oh, amazing. And how do the viewers get this book? Do they need to buy
That's
it?
a great question. Nope. It's free. It's just like a labor of love, something that I think that you need to know, because it's very easy to make mistakes. And for someone who, I understand how hard we work, like you said, 12 to 12. On some days for me, it's 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. Random, but they're hard hours, they're long hours. And so this, I want you to make sure that you're making the right decisions as you're trying to invest. So if you are on any social media platform, if you go to our website, you have access to it, and all you have to do is just download it.
Let me just do that for the viewers here, because I know attention span can be small.
That is true.
So I'm just going to share that. Please carry on.
Yes. So do you know it? If not, I'll tell it to you.
Okay. I think I've been on your.
Okay, great. You have. I saw some pictures. That is true. You have. So yeah. So that's how to find it. Or easily, if you are on LinkedIn, in my bio, you can just, like, I think it's one of the links in my bio.
Okay, so I'll just put your bio.
Put the LinkedIn bio, and you should have access to it. And that way you can go click on it, download it. It's not long, but it's solid information in it.
Because I'll tell you something interesting. Yeah. We have some very, very senior physician that's been doing this business for a long time here in the UK. So it's not like these are doctors that are maybe born in Nigeria, IMG, nothing like that.
Okay.
And they come out of retirement in 70s, and they need to do how ER surgery is. You need to, the trust, which is like the employer here in the UK, they wouldn't give you a contract if you can't do on calls. Like if the registrar or the resident, calls you, you need to be able to still do some certain, amount of operations electively or endoscopy. But because there's no passive income, and there's how your life usually would have you either lent directly or indirectly, or how in every society there's a bit of adjustment. We'll talk about black tax, which I don't think is just only black people that experience that, but that also adds to it. So you have people coming back and working for the entirety of their life. And I've seen this in the UK and it's not just any race group. I've seen it in all race groups among doctors. However, you would hardly see someone that was top in the banks, insurance company, that have to keep working for a paycheck beyond their 60s, except they are CEOs or something. So they just play it a bit differently. And I think that's why your book is just so amazing. So I put in the link to Dr. Nkem's LinkedIn, and I'm just going to put for the book. I think you have it on, I think it's Knowledge Center, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, so I've put in the link to the Knowledge Center for Phoenix Capital. Amazing playbook. I would read every single page of it. So if you, I think probably not to derail this, I would come back to that, but I wanted you to illustrate someone that is a doctor that earns X amount of money, in any part of the world. Mm-hmm. How would they use your playbook if they wanted to invest in a particular scenario that is passive? So maybe stock market, maybe any other thing. We'll come to this question. Just keep it with you for a minute.
Okay, I'll keep it.
Yeah. So financial realities, this is UK data, just because I don't think I'd not experienced US data, and there's this big fight between the BMA, which is the British Medical Association, that's AMA for the US, I believe.
Yeah.
And if you look at what's happened is the pay in 2008, doctors have not been able to, when you correct for inflation, and so if you take 2000 and so 17 years on,
wow,
what's happened is relative to the changes that's happened in society, doctors have not been able to recover. Now you would see where there's this dip. The dip has been, and the rise has come at a heavy cost. You probably wouldn't see this in the US, but that's the situation in Nigeria. So it's come at a heavy cost because there had to be strikes.
Mm-hmm.
And strikes, I don't like to be overcritical, but when you go on strike and you say, I'm not going to do this elective surgery, it leads to some delays, isn't it?
Yep.
And there will be some progression of the disease, however you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's come at a fair cost, but the doctors had to do it. In the UK, there's a stalemate again between what the government wants to do. The government said, listen, guys, we're going to give you guys 4% plus £75. So maybe around $900.
Okay.
Because that's what our experts think you deserve.
Wow.
The doctors have said, no, that's not a deal. We're going to ballot. So in the UK, you go through a ballot, and by UK law, I think you need, 55%.
Okay.
And then you start the strikes all over again. But in essence, I believe this is really, there's this in the US in one shape or form.
I agree.
Yes, probably not as pronounced because maybe the US is more insurance money.
Yep.
But again, even to get the money, it comes at the cost of your own time.
Yep.
And so this is the reality. Doctors, I don't think, are not the people that took care of the king back in the 90s, where therefore the king took care of you and everything you needed. So this has changed. Of course, working very hard comes with burnout.
Yeah.
Because you have this financial expectation or expectation of your society. And you were born in the States, but like myself now, everybody that is watching this, I don't have the whole money in London, so please, because everybody keeps sending me, requests, their wedding, naming ceremony, area, child's graduation, child naming. I don't have all the money in London. Okay. So that's also, of course, means there's an expectation of what people think they need.
Yeah.
And then what is realistically what an employer can offer. Now, even when you make the argument, but Meta is doing X, Y, Z, Meta, Tesla, and the rest have one CEO that they pay this. Every other person is really, getting what they can get in the pyramid.
Yep.
And the government's argument is, look, we give you a job that you can keep for as long as you like.
Yeah.
And so you need to deal with the rest. So that's dissatisfaction and, of course, burnout. Then there's the issue of debt, delayed life milestones, limited flexibility. So debt is significant even, and I think I have a chart where, so you can look at some of the erosions and all of this is from the UK BMA data, and it shows that it's not gotten back to 2008. And I saw something from Tony Robinson. Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
So he did an analysis. I think they started the iPhone in 2001. So if you bought all the model of iPhone from that time to now, it would have been, I think, a little around 60,000 USD. However, if you had the stocks, if you bought the stocks from that time with that amount, it's worth 25 million US dollars.
How many people did that? Probably
when he said it, it was extraordinary knowledge, and I think there were people that probably
didn't.
could afford the iPhone. So, in fact, some people could have bought iPhone and bought the stock at the same year because, they would have this new version every year.
Yeah.
And Apple, for instance, has continued to grow. And some of the companies have grown exponentially, at all of that. So, again, burnout, I think we've talked about. People know how much medical work can lead to burnout, and those are just.
I want to touch on this just a little bit, and
yes,
especially and I don't negate any field of medicine, but when you think about the emergency room, right? We see the worst of the worst, and we see death quite often. And so, and then when you think about the kind of the hours that we work, right? So, the emergency room is covered 24 hours a day, which means that at every second, there needs to be some sort of, there needs to be a physician in the hospital, which means that you will work holidays, you will work weekends, you will miss out on a lot of life, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit in limited flexibility, but and so when you feel like, again, it goes back to value, right? When you feel like that value isn't worth what you're doing, right? Or the pay doesn't amount to that, there's a level of resentment that comes with what you're doing, which then leads to burnout. And you start questioning, what is my reasoning for doing the thing that I'm doing, this thing that I love so much, right? I read a study that said, and this is across all physician specialties, the American College of Emergency Physician, I think, put this out, and they said 300 to 400 physicians die from suicide every year. That is very heartbreaking, right? Because these are people who decided that, like, I want to make a difference in the lives of others. I want to somehow touch lives at the hardest part of people's journeys, which is when we see them in the hospital. And to think that every year, 300 to 400 of those people end up taking their life for one reason or the other, it just makes you pause and realize, well, what are you doing? What is the reason behind the thing that we're doing? And we don't talk about it a lot, but mental health, has now become something that we really need to talk about when we talk about burnout, because, like I said, you see the worst of the worst, right? You're the person who diagnoses someone with cancer for the first time, who came in with like a little belly pain. You're the person who, like the family member is like visiting for Christmas, and before you know it, someone drops dead and they start doing CPR and they come to the ER. You're the same person that will give them bad news. And so when you start thinking about rates of suicide, life expectancy, you can understand how burnout plays a role, right? And so this is something that we shouldn't take lightly. We shouldn't take lightly at all. And we need to figure out a way to curb this. And that's the truth sometimes why a lot of physicians are looking outside of medicine. It is truly to figure out how to curb burnout, how to increase their financial satisfaction, because right now we feel like the value that we are creating doesn't equal the pay that we're getting. So that's something to just kind of think about as you try to understand burnout and financial dissatisfaction.
Yeah, it's really because we work with the ER very closely. So of course, if someone gets stabbed, it's London, stabbed in the neck, stabbed in the belly, you deal with the blood, you deal with the extra-rigs. Like, you can't tell if they have something in their bloodstream that's infectious. Then you deal with, the waiting times in ED in the UK is extraordinary. And so we have waiting times in my hospital as long as 12 hours.
Wow.
How patient can someone be? I mean,
It's not
so
like
really,
it's not, you see it's perspective because I complain about mine, but it's not 12 hours,
yeah.
on a bad days, 4 or 5 hours,
I
and
mean, that's amazing. 12 hours. Yeah, 12 hours. And then we come down because there's so much acute appendicitis in London, perforated and stuff. And so that's for the ED to see and say, fine, we think your appendix has something wrong. We need to get gen surge to come down and then take you out of ED and go sort it out. Then sometimes there's no bed. Then you need to call another person who's a bed manager. So, I mean, I am tired covering the entire hospital, isn't it? I mean, just how, so everyone is like really high pressure. ED is tired. Hospital management is tired. Of course, patient is annoyed. I've been with this pain for the last 8 hours. You need to do you need to bloody do something. That's how Brits will say it. Yeah. And then, so the whole place is boiling. Like you could feel the tension within the room. And then occasionally, sometimes you have corridor care. I'm not too sure whether you have that in the US, but what it really does mean is certainly look for beds and then people keep waiting. And then the nurses are overwhelmed. So some people may not have as much blankets as they should. And so regardless of how, you begin to feel tired, you begin to feel exhausted, and then the system, of course, each of these costs money. Like it costs a lot of money to train just one doctor and get them to specialize. And then for that doctor to go and, kill themselves, it's a really tragic loss for their families, for the work they put in. But the reality is these things are happening because the balance, I believe, has been lost. And I don't think there's any sign that it would go back. Because there are just many more of us now.
Yeah.
Because you could, even if you go to the continent, for instance, we had a time where you could count the number of neurosurgeons. Now you can't. So it's becoming, in fact, there's a very senior Royal College of Surgeons that said, listen, you have to come to accept that medicine, it's more a business now than a profession. So they want to count your hours. They want to count your mortality. So if you're a surgeon, they want to count how many operations you do. They are not too keen whether the gallbladder you did is the most complex. It's how come Nkem is doing 40 consistently and you're trailing at 18? Is there anything we can do to help? So you begin to realize that physicians begin to think everyone is like, you can't ignore the stats. Why? Because you are being used to create stats, and these stats are being published. So what that leads to is, at least in surgeons, and I probably think ER as well, people are beginning to treat difficult and complex patients. It's becoming something that physicians struggle with. Why? Because people are not as bold as they should. Because that's, again, the system looks at it in a different light. So all of these are things that I believe physicians of our era need to consider, in their careers more seriously. So we just look at, of course, rising cost has been another thing. I'll probably not spend too much time. Here, however, I mean, the medical student debt, even if it's not for anything, I think you just need to be an entrepreneur, even if it's just to clear your debt. I would think, especially in the States. And
I walked I left with, I want to say 275. And I think that was on the lower end. I think my roommate probably left with closer to 400. How do you
Wow.
start? How do you start? How do you even start when you're that far behind, right?
Yeah.
Like where do you even begin to think about how am I going to make money? How am I going to grow when you are in so much debt just at the starting line, right? It puts you years behind your peers. And then, if you subspecialize and, like I did emergency medicine and my training was 3 years. So I was able to start paying it off. But like one of my close friends who did general surgery and then who subspecialized in colorectal surgery, who then spent an additional, like almost 7 years in training or more, plus research, where how do you even, like, when you get out, what does payment of debt look like? So it's something, and I looked at this slide and I thought, wow, 45,000, that is like, like
Yeah, I mean, compared to the US,
but it's just something, another layer to factor in what you're doing, even adds to the dissatisfaction. It keeps piling on each other, and you're supposed to come out and still take care of patients and figure out how to start your life and figure out how to build, and figure out and how to do all the things that you want to do. And I want us to kind of touch a little bit on like all the freedoms that you now want to have and you might not have the opportunity to have because of just the financial reality of what modern medicine looks like.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And these are the things that I believe make people frustrated.
Yep.
Because it just seems I'm working so hard. But where is the money? You know, that's and there's this myth that used to be there before that if you're an ING, somehow you escape this debt. Not necessarily. You escaped a decent chunk. But what happens is you need to pay for license. And I'm applied for Irish license, and I think it cost me around $2,000 or something like that. So by the time you do your licensing, you do USMLE, you do XYZ, you pay planes, it's creeping up.
Yep.
When you come into the country, maybe you need a little, you take a little loan for this and that and that and that and that. Eventually, it almost equilibrizes with whatever you get, and you are in the debt. Even if you do nothing new, you'll be in that debt for a solid 10 years. So means you're almost blocked out from being able to invest in anything. So it's just really something doctors need to take serious. Okay. Again, lots of data here from the Nulfield Trust. So we've looked at just one of the stark reality is if you look at pay and cost of living in 2010, it's only those that work in the private sector that were able to be above cost of living. So, and I think one of the things that make doctors frustrated is if you look at just how much effort you need to put, it's similar to some of the most successful in the private sector.
Yeah.
And I say to someone that the reality, you need to start thinking of the brain as a tool. You can use it to do neurosurgery or ER or create a chip, or that's just really all it is. Now, while you can say, oh, I'm doing noble work, you are going to exist within an economy. And after a while, you begin to feel, if I've given this much to the system, you may start feeling frustrated because you're not getting that much. Every other profession you can see aside those in the private sector, it didn't. And I don't think this has changed. No. And I don't think this would change, because even if I was a politician, I wouldn't give you as much as private sector. why you can't just be able to, if you do public service like you do across most of Europe or you do in Nigeria, me and them will just be going to court. That's really how I'll do it. So sorry guys, but in reality is you quickly run out of money.
Yeah.
Quickly. And that's your political career gone. So in reality, the MPs would not, try and catch up with private sector. But what I think is most of our colleagues are not looking at these numbers. Why? Because sometimes you just have so much to learn from the thick books, the thick courses, the long hours, and you just exist in a bubble, and time really passes quickly. And if you add that for those that need to move from country to country, it's a different conversation entirely, because you have people, for instance, in Canada or in the US, they would start as physician assistant or physician something. And then, the years just go by and the immigration drama, and then time just really passes by. But these are just the reality. But what I realize in the UK, you don't need any qualification to start a company. Not one. You don't need any special type of visa to start a company. So if you compare, there is the opportunity there. So it's just the knowledge and to use it. So this is, again, I think was this same thing. You can see, again, issues of money. Now, if you do correct, now this is the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian, don't mind them. You don't start at £125,000 when you become a consultant. You start at 105.
Okay.
And then in the UK, it takes probably twice the time, because there's all of these rules that mean that they don't pay you that much until you work for this number of years. And of course, in relative terms, you pay more tax in the UK than the US. Yes, so that's all the reality. But you can see it's still, the issues of money. But one of the things you find, if you really take a good doctor from England or Germany or Korea and compare with the US at the same level, you would expect similar competencies.
That is correct.
Area. So the expectation and skill is
the same across the board.
Is across board. So again, that creates some resentment.
Yep.
And that's what's driving the pull and push. And so all of these, important factors. I think we've talked a lot about this money. Again, there's issues with autonomy. I don't know how it is in the US, but if you take a resident contract or a consultant contract, there are just rules about it. And from some trusts, they require you to not do any independent private work until after 3 years.
Yep, that's correct.
And then they get you to sign this contract and all of that. So, I mean, I would think the 3 years is probably what's that most productive time when energy is high, drive is high, motivation is high. And now after the 3 years, what happens? Zeal is out, at least in the UK system. So the way it works, I don't know how it works in the US. If you're not in the game, they keep your stats. So what happens is the insurance people, if you're not doing private practice, what happens is the people that are doing private practice keep stacking. So they tend to give them all the patients. So even when you are now eligible to do, you would now need to accumulate a decent traction of patients. So which further complicates
how you start.
So you may just be out for 5 years, except maybe you discover how to do some new procedure or you do something, really amazing that brings you traction. But I know consultants that they can't just seem to get decent amount of private work because the private work keeps going to the same people. So, yeah, so those are, some of the, and again, I think we've talked about this is just UK data showing there's not enough, for instance, doctors, nurses. So what that really
100%.
means,
There's truly not enough for the population, the growing population anywhere. And so you're finding, we are now bending the rules a little bit to figure out who can help in the practice of medicine to take care of patients. And just kind of understanding, the limited autonomy comes from being a trainee, and that is very understandable. When you're young and when you're fresh out of school, you have zero autonomy because you need to learn, and you need to be able to take care of patients well so that you don't hurt patients, right? Because at the end of the day, it's do no harm. But you are giving up all your time. You're giving up every single ounce of your time, and it's focused on this. And that in the beginning is not a bad thing, right? Because this is, again, at the end of the day, patient care, patient lives are at stake. But as you progress in your journey, right, that the question is then, what is my time worth, right? I did all of this and all I do is medicine, whether it's 9 to 5, whether it's 12 to 12, whether it's 24 hours, right? But then you also think, well, I want a life, and I want to travel, and I want a family, and I want to build whatever it is that you want to build. And so you start thinking about all the other freedoms that you are not, you're not, I don't want to say that you're not eligible for, but that you might not get, right? And then you start thinking, well, how can I buy back some of my time? This time that is so precious, because this is the only one life that we get to live. How can I buy back my time? How can I spend time with family if that's important to me? How can I grow a family if that's important to me? How can I see this world if all I'm doing is is medicine? So that's why some of that goes back to burnout, or some of those ideas come to you that you start thinking, if this is solely tied to income, how else can I grow my income so that some of these freedoms become accessible to me? That's how you start thinking. And that's maybe what brings some of the burnout, some of the resentment, some of the questioning. But when you go back to just anywhere around the world, right, the resources are very limited. The physician manpower, very limited. And so you're seeing doctors who are overworked, who are overburdened, who are burnt out. And the question is, like, is the pay enough? And most times the answer is no.
Thanks. You've elucidated that, quite eloquently. I think so. That's going to mean that for people, you may really need to do more than what you're paid for. Sometimes realistically, I would stay an hour and a half, but you can't just keep asking, because realistically, it's the system sometimes is doing its best in the context of everything that's happening. So here we'll talk a bit more back to Phoenix Capital. And one of the things you've talked about is diversifying, income. And there's a huge word that goes around is investment portfolio. I do not think, maybe it's me, but I don't think a lot of doctors understand what an investment portfolio is. So if you do break it down for us, and then certainly, of course, your area of interest is real estate, that would be amazing.
So it saddens my heart that you just said that a lot of doctors don't understand. And
I think I may be wrong.
And no, you're not wrong. And I think that's where the problem starts, right? Is that we are experts in our field. We are, you talk about medicine, you ask me any question in the emergency department, I'll most likely get it right, right? But if you ask me, or before, if you asked about, like, what am I doing with my finances, or what does an investment portfolio is, what does diversification mean, I may not have been able to answer it, because we don't know anything but medicine. But as soon as we're done with training, we are thrust out into the world, we start making money, and we're supposed to figure it all out. And sometimes all we do is just hand our money to maybe a financial advisor, and we're like, do what you think is best. But that's not the best solution. That's not the best case scenario, right? Best case scenario is that you understand what's happening with your hard-earned money. This is the money that you're spending 12 hours, 24 hours working for, right? That you're missing out on family events, you're missing out on life, for this reason. And maybe if you started a little bit later, right, your best years were focused on building your medical career. And so the question is, what does that look like? And I touched on it a little bit, and I want to emphasize. And actually, the Washington Journal just put out a post that said, most of the millionaires. Wall Street Journal just put out an article, said most millionaires, right, make their money through business ownership and investing. And investing in stocks and real estate. And so that's why this is something that we need to know. We need to understand, what does it mean to truly diversify your wealth, diversify your portfolio? And entrepreneurship is a big part of that, right? A business ownership, whatever that looks like. But it's also, starting to figure out how you can reroute your funds to a real estate portfolio, to a stock portfolio, to start building outside of your 9 to 5, right? And with entrepreneurship, sometimes it looks like, what are your skills, right? As a physician, we have a ton of skills that are transferable into real work, right? Not that medicine is not real work, but like outside of the hospital, outside of our medical careers. And the question is now figuring out again, right? What are the pain points of the people that you serve? How can you create value? Because the second that you can solve someone's problem, right? The second that you can give them immense value, the exchange for money becomes a no-brainer. And it's like, okay, yes, you've solved that problem for me. Here you go. And so when we start figuring out, like, how do you diversify your portfolio, right? Think about real estate investing, and it's truly a way to build wealth outside of your 9 to 5. So you can do that. You can do it without abandoning your clinical activity. You can do it without leaving your 9 to 5. You actually have more joy and satisfaction, because you realize that the entirety of who you are is not tied to your clinical practice. It's not tied to what you're doing morning to night. And maybe you even take care of your patients with a little bit more joy, because you're like, okay, like passive income is coming in. I'm growing wealth for my family. I'm building for generations to come. And I'm doing all these things. So when you think about your portfolio, right, start thinking about, how can I put money in different buckets so that those buckets are all growing while I'm still growing in the hospital, while I'm doing what I love. The stocks are growing, real estate portfolio is growing, whatever else that you're doing is also growing. So that's how to think about entrepreneurship, diversification, as you start venturing out.
Amazing. So I'll just add a really interesting story. So when you have consultants, senior doctors in Nigeria, you find that the ones that have thriving private work tend to be more friendly, more tolerant, they tend to be more, if you like, generous, and really teach more. This is just anecdotal. Maybe there's something to it. But I think it touches on the fact that you've said. I really realized, when I started doing more entrepreneurial work, I really love going to hospital more.
So did I.
And I just enjoying the chat with the patient. So it comes because I'm not under pressure about anything. I just want to enjoy the time. I want to, for instance, I'm interested in the case. I'm happy to stay here all night and beyond. And it goes back to when I was young, and anyone would say this, at least in the Nigerian context, you found the most friendliest were the ones that had some sort of business. They teach the most. They are more tolerant. Oh, fine, he doesn't, because of course, Nigerian culture is very direct. I mean, the training of medicine is like with the baptism of fire. Of course, you can't do a lot of that I mean, the US maybe a little bit. In the UK, of course, there's just so much of that you can do. But I think this is really something that, what you said, real estate is extraordinary. And there's one of the things I did try to convince the union in Nigeria to do. And I said to them, look, we have this bunch of union. And then I think if they are listening to this, I'll just remind them for a second time. I told them this 5 years ago. I said, I don't see why we don't own some shares in private hospitals around Nigeria. I can't see why the NMA wouldn't, or ARD. And maybe I'm a bit too critical of them. And I don't see, because they are a very dues-based organization. And really, if it's maybe I'm being critical to them, but I mean, I'm entitled to, because I'm a member of both. So the problem is, if you look at the BMA or the BMJ, this is the investing example. Because the union and the leader need to set an example for people to understand that it can be done. There's nothing that prevents BMA or NMA investing in banks, or most importantly, investing in the hospitals that is struggling. Why? There's some financial firepower, there's some human resources firepower, and then they can always collaborate with the nurses. So these are some of the, examples of the portfolio you've been talking about. And interestingly, the GMC has an extensive portfolio. The GMC is the regulatory body in the US, in the UK. It has an extensive investment portfolio. The BMA has an extensive investment portfolio. They've got money in everything. They've got their hands in everything. The Royal College has an extensive investment portfolio. And so this is just, the point that we've been saying. And what I realized, it helps you build new skills. Now because I have my own business now, I take HR more seriously. I take just soft skills more seriously.
100%.
More seriously. And I look at many more things. Like I'm interested in what's the price of fish now, because I have a couple of fish farms in Nigeria. I have a little bit of clothes business, so I'm interested in how things move from country to country, and I'm gaining new skills. I'm also a bit interested in fish disease now. Why? Because I have one, so it's new skills, isn't it? And it's just really amazing. So I'll just say you've had some properties which you guys manage already at Phoenix. One of them is Parkview and
McKinley. So we have partnered and acquired, and we're about to acquire a fifth property, and that is and so that's totaling 95 million in assets under management. And that's the cost of all the properties that we've partnered with and invested with our investors. And so we are seeing success in our investors who are getting passive income on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, as a way to diversify their portfolio, as a way to grow wealth. So they are now enjoying the benefits of investing in these properties. And as we continue to grow, we bring in more investors, and it's really it's a great story, like on the days that we give out distributions, because you're seeing the impact that you're making in the lives of your investors, and it's been really rewarding. So we are more than grateful that as we grow and as we scale, that this is a need, right? Especially in the healthcare professional space, this is a need, and to be able to fill that has been very rewarding for us.
Amazing. So just to put it in context, while we're still here, what's the minimum I need I know you're not accepting investors, except I watched your video wrongly, but I think it's closed now.
So the Rise, we have a new investment opportunity that we just released last week. So it's like super brand new, and we're accepting investors into that one. But the minimum investment is $50,000 US dollars, and that gets you in. So at that, you would be making about 16 16.25% each year on your investment. So if you compare that to kind of what you're doing in the stocks, or even money in your bank account or your savings account, the reality is that, you would make a lot more if you
Yeah,
invest.
I think bank account will probably give you 3, 4. The best will give
That's
you 3.
true. If you put it in like a high yield savings account, but if you put it in a regular savings account, you're making like 0.05, at
Yes.
0.75 if you at best. But
Yes.
so it just figures out the downside to this, I will say, is that this is illiquid. So you are putting the money in, and you are putting the money in for the lifetime of the deal, which is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So as
Okay.
opposed to like in the stock market that you can, today you can decide, okay, I just want to liquidate, I want to sell my stocks. This is a little bit more illiquid, but the upside is a lot more significant.
So while we're still here,
Yeah.
So the 16%, that you talked about, is this on a yearly basis?
Yes, it is on a yearly basis. Yes, that is.
So because we have UK audiences, I think £50,000 would be around 42,000, 50,000 USD.
Would be around 42,000. That is correct. Yes.
So 16% of 50,000 USD would be around how much? 6,000.
That is correct. So that would look like, no, it'd be a little bit more. So if let's use 100,000 for easy math.
Yes.
So if we use 100, that would look like on a yearly basis. Let me do.
That would be 16.
Yep, that would be 16. So that
would be 8.
Yep. So that is. Yep. So that's about 16. So you're making 8. You're correct. So that looks.
So if we divide 8, because I know our UK people want to know how much they'll get per month. So if we divide 8 by 12, 8,000.
So that looks like about almost $650 a month.
That's really good, because the thing is, the UK is relatively cheaper to live in. So that's a solid £500.
Yep.
And let me tell you something interesting. That would be the deposit you probably would put for a mortgage that you keep paying into.
It just depends.
I mean, here.
Okay. Yeah, you might not, depending on what you're buying, that might not get you a mortgage or even close.
Yeah. I think it'd be unlikely. So the reality is, what you are offering is probably better than whatever is out there. And now, what happens to my money at the end of the deal?
Great. So at the end of the deal, you get your money back, because think about it, right? We use it to buy. We all put money together to buy a property. And so when we sell, you're going to get your return of your capital. So you get return of your capital, and then you'll get return on your capital. So you will get a significant amount at time of sale, because between the year we bought it and the year we sell it, right, there's been significant appreciation of the property. So you will benefit in that appreciation as well. So you're going to get, if you put in 50 or 100, you get that back. Plus, over the years, you would have been getting your distributions. And then at time of sale, you will get that appreciation portion as well. So if you looked at, let's just say, if you put in a 50,000, at the end of it, in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, let's lean towards 5 years just for easy math, right? You probably would walk away with closer to 85 and maybe 90,000. So that's what it looks like on your money at the end of the deal over the 5 years.
I think what you're offering is probably better than almost anything I've seen out there. Because, I mean, if you buy a mortgage, you have all these rules around. You can't paint the house the color you want. You can't do Airbnb, because the bank owns the house, isn't it? Especially for small mortgage owners. But looking at what you offer, they're almost doubling their money, really, and then getting the interest as well. Now, let's look at global investors. How does that work?
Good question. So we definitely take UK investors we take UK investors into the US, as well as Nigerian investors. we have a system, our lawyers created a blocker system where then you can invest through a company that will then invest in the property. So it's definitely possible. It's something that we can do if anybody's interested.
Well, amazing. But I think what you're offering is probably, I'm not seeing as much deals. One, because the risk is very little.
Yes.
If there's any at all.
So there is risk, right? And I don't want to oversell. I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is an investment opportunity, and with every investment comes risk, right? But you have to take calculated risks in order to make money, right?
Yeah.
The people who make the most money, like I said, business ownership, investments. So there is some risk, but you have to do your research. You have to do your due diligence to make sure that this is the right opportunity for you.
Now, I think without going into too much details, is it blocked out? What happens if someone says, I changed my mind? How does that work?
Okay, good question.
I think they need to email you and get this one.
So that's a really good question. And I said it before, right? This is pretty illiquid. So that means that you are committing for the lifetime of the deal.
Okay.
And that means that if this is truly disposable income. So, and you and I will have a conversation before. If you also don't meet the criteria, then this is not an investment opportunity for you. And this is not money. You're not taking money out of your savings account, or no, you're not taking money out of your emergency funds to do this, right? You are truly taking extra income that you have that is not doing anything, and that you can use to do something better, which is make more money, which is invest it passively while you're doing what you're doing. So that's also something. And so because of that, right, you have to understand that it is what we call illiquid. The money is not something that like tomorrow or next.
So it's like a fixed deposit for the duration of the maturation of the deal.
Yes. That's an easy way to put it.
Amazing. So I think amazing properties, certainly I think the US property market is probably one of the most dynamic in the world. And I think people probably will continue to move more, towards different parts of the world. But I think the deal is really a good one, because one of the things I've seen with at least doctors, they are quite really interested in passive, really passive things. Not too many of us would do things that requires management on a daily basis. Yeah. So I think this is something that we should talk more about in the UK doctor space. I think there would be really UK based doctors that are keen about anything real estate. In fact, one of my colleagues was just telling me how he wants to buy a house. I think he should think of these rather than, paying into mortgage that doesn't really multiply money. And you have inheritance tax after you've had it for like 35 years and paid it off. You can't give it to your children without inheritance tax. At least in the UK, I'm not sure about US law. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So if you give your house to your children, the government will charge them inheritance tax, and I think it's about 40%. And of course, the house would have, if you had it for that long,
appreciated. Yep.
Yeah, don't forget, England is a very old country, so the buildings they're not new. So if you add, some 20, and your buildings, some of them are as young as 5 years, 10 years old.
Yes. The one we're acquiring is very brand new. It's 2+ years old. So very, very brand new. We bought it in 2022. So just a little over 3 years, actually.
So amazing. I think it's really good. Compared to everything, because, it's only fair to compare it with other things there. So I think we've talked, this is just a bit of information. I think one of the things that we probably do, all of us, is we probably look into the tunnel too much.
Yeah.
And one needs to have a more broader picture. I just think we've had a really good conversation that's looked at everything. People are, as well, fear failure.
Yes.
Imposter syndrome.
I agree.
I think imposter syndrome should be taken as an opportunity, a learning time, and it's probably an inbuilt-in mechanism that says, look, you need to earn your right to be in the space that you want to be. And I know not everybody likes him, but Jordan Peterson did have a clip where he talked about it, and he said, listen, yeah, because the reality, if you're new into something, you're actually an imposter. Why? Because you are this, however you want to come into where you are that. And the transformation from this to that, means you are really a guest until you become welcome in new reality.
Let me add to that real quickly. And that is that I struggled with imposter syndrome for a bit. And for anybody who's thinking, yes, you want to invest, that's important. But for anybody who's thinking about building, right, about stepping out of what you know, there's a struggle, right? And so I don't want us to kind of go past this real quickly, and maybe like we're running short on time, but I think this is so important as you think about stepping out into building something, into creating something, into learning something new, right? You have to truly let go of this I'm a doctor and that's it, right? That mindset that I can only do one thing, I've only done one thing. That is such an incorrect mindset, and it's so limiting. It's one of the biggest limiting beliefs that you can hold on to, is that all I did was medicine, therefore all I can do is medicine. It's not true. You can be a business owner. You can be an author. You can be a leader. You can be a speaker. You can do whatever it is that you want to do, right? And I heard this, and I can't remember who told me this, but an expert is just knowing more than one person in the room, right? And so when you think about it that way, right, then it's such a short distance to go from imposter to expert, because you're just better than one person in that whole room. And so that idea, I've held on to it so much, and it's helped me. It's kind of given me wings to fly, right? That I can become this expert. I can become this person who knows. And obviously, right, we are physicians, we're healthcare providers, and we want to be the best of the best. And so knowing more than one person is not enough, right? If I'm going to lead people to come join me, then I want to know the most, right? And I put a lot of time, effort into building Phoenix into that, into the real estate investment opportunity and company that it is today. But I just want to empower someone who's thinking, right? In the beginning, you will have a fear of failure, the opinion of other people being a problem. What if I fail? What if I don't succeed? Should I just go back to medicine? And all of those are just, they're such tiny blips in the big picture that you have, or in the big dream that you're going after. But if you don't fight those in the beginning, if you don't figure out how to fix those, right, you will succumb to whatever that is, and you won't give yourself the opportunity to grow and to do the things that you need to do. So how you push through, right? You push through by reading. You push through by surrounding yourself with the right types of people, the people who their dreams don't scare you and your dreams don't scare them, right? That you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and this. And that's okay, right? Now, of course, as you build, you should be an expert in one before you move to the other. But if your dream is to really change the world, is to really impact lives, you can do that, right? We are so fortunate as physicians, as doctors, that because we already have this amazing foundation that comes with a level of trust, and a level of just a solid foundation, that really, when we step up to speak, when we put our hands and our minds and our heart into different things, right? People pause and they listen to us. And so all the work that we have done is not in vain. It is to help us do whatever it is that you want to do. And so don't take that for granted. Don't take that lightly, and use that as rocket fuel to do whatever it is that you want to do, to become that value creator, right? That you know that you can be, because at the end of the day, your deep-seated goal and your deep-seated vision and mission is to help someone else solve a problem that they have by creating that value for them. So as you think about building, as you think about doing, as you think about creating, you will have struggles and you will have fears, but please don't let that hold you back, especially if you have something really amazing, something cool, something beautiful that you want to share with the world.
Oh, just so beautifully put. So I think, yes, really, this just a summary in terms of moving through reading. I would traveling as well. I found you to move around the world. For me, maybe it's just my ritual. So sometimes I would go to as part of a city that inspires me. So it's like I take energy from nature, and then it could be beautiful cities, and it could bring you creative sport. The other thing again is, I think one of the things we lose after a while is as you become better at doing medicine, you lose your ability to become a student of your craft. And I think that's one of the things that make people struggle to get into new stuff. When I wanted to start building farms, I bought fish building farms books. I got teachers that had nothing to do with medicine, that had farms. I had a few people I could watch there. Just one doctor was doing what I was in a different country. And I tried to, again, understand the process. I would sit down, watch, read, make notes. And I also realized that with everything, patience and persistence, I think Jay-Z said this, that the only thing that will get you through this is patience and persistence. Sometimes, as much as you want the universe to give you something, in my opinion, you must convince the universe, the gods, whoever, or the bosses even, how much do you really want this? And so when the tenacity is really needed, and as it keeps coming through, you would find. And if you read the scripture, sometimes there's a place in the Bible that it says, you cannot confirm that something is gold until you pass it through fire. And therefore, when it comes on the other side, it's still gold. And if it's silver, it will still be silver. If it's bronze, it will be bronze. However, if it's wood and porous, it will burn and become ash. So these things. So I think, like you said, doctors have all of the resources to excel. However, people must be open to readapt their skills, to go back to the very basics, to be students of craft, and give the process the time it deserves. Americans say, do the research, put in the work, or nobody would out-hustle me. Nobody out-hustles you. So amazing minds. So same thing. The other thing we wanted to talk here is, as doctors, as physicians, you have a lot of technical skills. You again have some non-technical skills that already exist that you can take to the boardroom, you can take to the business. I don't think there's anyone, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that gets more training on communication than we. At least person-to-person communication. Maybe not crowd, but one-to-one. So if you begin to think just how much you would think about you communicating with your patients, and you'd say, what I would do is, in my business, I'm going to try and take the communication that I have with people seriously. You begin to see how important. If you think of teamwork, the way you work with other physicians, when you do a referral, the nurses, and you begin to say, I'm going to build my team. I'm going to spend some time learning the theory of teamwork, norming, forming, storming, so that when things look bizarre, at least I have some theoretical model that can keep me going. Leadership, You can see, you can take the little leaderships that you do. So a lot of this, and I'm not too sure there's any profession where you are taught as much professionalism as medicine. You know, being on time is good for your business, isn't it? Being courteous is good for your business. You know, having dressing smart is good for your business.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you sell chocolates or you sell chewing gum or you sell Coca-Cola or you sell real estate. You know, listening to people. These are all skills that physicians, situational awareness, when you come in, you try to understand where are they coming from, where are they going to, you can read the room, you can understand body language. So there's a lot that physicians, prioritization skills, who goes first. Again, ER, whether you're internal medicine physician, you're a surgeon, these are things that you already can reuse. Decision making informed based on facts.
Yeah.
Why should I go with this? You see, we've looked at the numbers, stocks versus what you're offering. What's the risks involved? What's the amount of time that would stay? So that way you can more better invest your money and say, fine, I can lock out this amount for at least 5 years. Because I've seen a lot of doctors that have bought mortgage in the UK and then they are moving to Canada. They are after like a year and a half.
Yep.
They're trying to sell and they lose some of the money. So these are just some of the points. Same thing, putting a bit of imposter archetype, but this is just for probably knowledge and things to do that can help with, you know, dealing, you know, focus, being able to focus and zoning, you know, looking at details. Again, I've not seen too many professions that you can look at details, which means that if you go to a field, you can take a contract. Even if I don't understand it, what do? I would create, what's the sub-paragraph you tell medical students to do, and then I keep summarizing, what I understand.
Yeah.
So when I go to, because the patients do it, so I copied it too. When some of my patients come, especially, you know, patients in they will have all the questions they want to ask. Oh, so I mean, I'm amazed by, you know, just how serious they take it. I want to know, what's the chance of this failing?
Yep.
What sort of anesthesia? You know, they have a journal.
They write it all down.
And so it's, again, same thing. You have these details, small print, you know, moving it into, as we're just rounding up. So we've talked about, I think, extensively about transferable skills. We have so many of them. Of course, there are new ones to learn.
Yeah.
You know, buying and selling is not, I think I have a lot to learn about buying and selling, you know, but there are a lot of skills that are transferable that people can use, of course, mentors. And yes, so here is you again, for those that really want to engage with Phoenix. Just, I think, beyond even investing, I think the passive playbook is something that they probably, a lot of people should consider getting. And
let me say this real quickly. And you touched on it a little bit, which is when I started thinking about venturing outside of medicine, I was fortunate because I had, I had coaches and I had mentors who held my hand and who I was able to look to and ask questions, right? So if you are thinking about, what does life outside of medicine look like? How could I even begin? Just take me up on this offer and reach out to me and have a conversation. And I will lay down exactly how I did it. And you might not be able to use some of the resources and some of the tools I used because it was focused really on building my real estate investment firm, Phoenix. But I think that a lot of the tools and skills are actually transferable to building a side hustle, building a personal brand, how I started on LinkedIn and how I grew, and how I now use that as like a really solid revenue source on LinkedIn, which you wouldn't even understand or know how. But all of those things are important in building a community and building a network of people who want what you have to offer, right? So if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about, obviously, if you're thinking about investing, reach out. But if you're also just thinking about what does life outside of medicine look like, what could that look like? What do I want to do? How do I start? What books do I need to read first? You should definitely reach out, because it's good. It's great information to pass along to people, because all you need is just someone to tap into that right part of you, or to ask that right question that then just sets the fire blade, right? Fan into flames that thing, that desire that you have in you. So if you're listening and you're like, I really, I want more, right? And I don't know how, I don't know who, I didn't even know that there were people like that exist, just reach out to me. I'd love to kind of link arms with you as you figure out your next steps.
There's actually a song, Reach Out by Nas. And in the song, he said, I'm the good seed. His father is the good gardener. So
I
the
like
point,
that.
yeah, so I'm the good seed, is the right gardener. He talked about his father is a musician.
Mhm.
And, I listen to anything that has strong message. So his father is a jazz musician. So his father was really the successful person. So he was talking about cradle, how when people move.
Uh-huh.
So his father, of course, he's the seed of his father.
Yeah.
And then he's the good seed. His father is the right gardener. So when you have good seed, right gardener, you
You
sprout.
can flourish.
And I think there's no probably better way than someone that's walked the path that you've walked, and then like they would say it in the UK, they point you in the right directions.
Yeah.
I think the era where people if you do things by trial and error, it's very likely that you would underachieve, because you would burn most of your energy correcting mistakes that you've made yourself. And if you are not lucky, you burn again the resources that you have.
Yeah.
And you clearly be behind your peers. So Phoenix, I think we've talked about.
Yes, we have.
It's what it's done. It's top notch. We've talked about your career and just how much you've supported. You've also touched on the multi-family real estate approach. And I think just beyond that, just being a student of trying to understand real estate, because sometimes I just engage in things because I don't know for other people, but I think knowledge is like an archive. You need to update your database. And so sometimes I just go to get new information. So it starts begin to influence how I consciously and unconsciously think.
Yes.
And putting it out there. And yes, guys, thank you for listening. Thanks to Dr. Nkem for being here, CEO of Phoenix Investment Capital from Nashville, Tennessee. Of course, if you are in the States, I would really go to one of your events. And I just think physical events have a different element to them.
I agree.
They have a different energy in the room, whether you call it psychic energy, but there's just a different energy about them. So now and then, I think go to a physical event, come out of your comfort zone, be open to learn, be the good seed so that you have the right gardener, and then sprout. Let's see if we have some questions. So we'll wait a little bit for questions. We've run slightly over, but I think it's been an amazing, really, really an amazing conversation. And thanks for coming.
You're very welcome. I loved every second of it.
Thank you. I think probably we would try to do maybe a more purposed investment approach to it.
Okay.
Maybe for the global audience, we do have, of course, audiences just beyond from a diverse background. So blacks, Asians, everyone wants to do. One of the recurrent thing is doctors are more keen with passive investment now because I think it improves the primary work, because then you don't take a shift just because you want more money, and then you really go in and you enjoy, and so the hours don't feel like they're long hours. So I think maybe a session on how global investors, and maybe a little bit breakdown of the maths, because I mean, if I understand the audiences, they'd like to know
Exactly.
X, how much comes. So what can it do? They begin to say, oh, it would buy milk, it would pay electricity, all these little things. I would think for in America, you have middle America, isn't it? For the middle class, it would really be something. There's a small number. There would be some people that have some of the firepower in Nigeria that would be interested in something like this. In my Nigerian brain, is likely to be for their children.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would think. There's a small number, but certainly in the UK, there is really, it looks like an opportunity that I think it makes sense. And of course, people need to do their due diligence, but a bit of breakdown of the numbers would really be good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm up for it. Let me know when.
Okay, thank you for coming. I think I've kept you long enough, and thanks for really being so kind and generous.
You're welcome. I loved it. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And this conversation was very much needed from beginning to end. And I hope that this really brings some clarity to the people that are listening to it.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys, and thanks to everyone that's tuned in.